All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're putting on our Old Testament scholar hats to explore something absolutely fascinating. We're going to look at how the visceral, inner turmoil of a single prayer, Psalm 55, perfectly maps onto the massive political and cosmic crisis we find in 2 Samuel chapters 15 through 19. It's truly a masterclass in reading the Bible's historical narratives right through its poetic, emotional core. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the anatomy of a royal betrayal, the city of broken order, Ahithophel's descent into treachery, the cosmic power of Sheol, curses, grief, and kingship, and finally, the sovereign divine king. Basically, we're going to trace what you could call a cosmic geography of betrayal. We'll descend from a broken city, down into the dark abyss of Sheol, and finally ascend to the eternal throne. Let's get started.
Section 1. Anatomy of a Royal Betrayal. The intersection of text and history. We're starting right at the fracture point, the exact place where the poetic inner world of King David's prayer collides with the grim historical reality of his son Absalom's rebellion.
Now this brilliantly illustrates the two-sided coin of betrayal. On one side, in Psalm 55, we read that David's heart is beating violently, and fear and panic are just completely overpowering him. Scholars actually call this entropic anxiety. His internal psychological universe is literally unraveling. And why? Well, because over in 2 Samuel 15, we see the external reality. His son, Absalom, has intercepted justice at the city gate and stolen the hearts of Israel. So David's internal collapse is perfectly mirroring the external collapse of his earthly kingdom.
Think about David's physical movement out of Jerusalem here. It isn't just a hasty political retreat. It perfectly traces a theological threshold crossing. First, he leaves the gate of Phia where justice was just hijacked. Then he crosses the Kidron Valley, exiting the sacred center entirely. He ascends the Mount of Olives, weeping, and finally he enters the wilderness. He is crossing from a space of ordered kingship straight into a liminal, highly vulnerable space of exile. Section 2. The City of Broken Order, a Failed Axis Mundi. You know, in the ancient biblical worldview, Jerusalem wasn't just a location on a map. It was an axis mundi, a sacred center and a microcosm of divine order. Or at least it was supposed to be.
But what we're actually seeing here is a concept scholars call anthropogenic decreation. That's a very academic way of saying that human sin, violence, and betrayal have completely dismantled the communal order. Jerusalem is supposed to be the ultimate ordered sacred space, but human treachery causes a catastrophic decreation. Violence just totally replaces justice. The ordered world is literally plunging backwards into chaos. As David agonizingly laments in Psalm 55, violence and deceit do not depart from its public square. And you know what the profound irony here is? The physical walls of the city are completely intact. From the outside, Jerusalem looks perfectly defended, yet it is entirely destroyed from the inside out by systemic deceit. The real enemy isn't breaching the walls. The enemy is patrolling them. Wow. Section 3. Ahithophel's descent into treachery, the bitter counselor. To really grasp this inner rot, we have to profile the archetypal betrayer himself. Enter Ahithophel. This was a man whose strategic words were treated with such intense reverence, it was like hearing the very oracle of God.
Ahithophel transforms from a trusted covenant companion into this terrifying anti-prophetic force. But why does he do it? Well, it's highly likely fueled by deep-seated familial vengeance. Genealogical clues in Samuel actually suggest Ahithophel was Bathsheba's grandfather. So David's past sins, the adultery with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband Uriah, created this bitter, festering wound. Ahithophel weaponizes his brilliant wisdom to orchestrate lethal counsel against the king, which ultimately and tragically leads to his own demise.
This perfectly highlights the terrifying power of corrupt wisdom. In Psalm 55, David writes about a betrayer whose speech is as smooth as butter, but who secretly harbors war in his heart. His words seem softer than oil, but they are drawn swords. And in 2 Samuel 17, we see the literal application of this. Ahithophel advises Absalom to immediately strike David with 12,000 men. Intimacy and shared worship in God's temple have been weaponized into the ultimate betrayal. Section 4. The Cosmic Power of Sheol, the Abyss of Judgment. When intimate trust is violated to this degree, the ancient Israelite mind doesn't just demand a simple political defeat for the traitor, it demands a cosmic judgment.
Which brings us to the concept of Sheol. Now in this context, Sheol isn't just a dusty grave waiting for you at the end of a long life,
It's invoked as an active cosmic power of abrupt, premature judgment. It represents the downward trajectory of what we call elimination theology, a divine action meant to suddenly and forcefully purge a corrupting evil from the very center of the community. That is exactly why David's raw, imprecatory prayer in Psalm 55 cries out, "May death destroy them, may they go down alive into Sheol." He is asking for the betrayers to be swallowed whole, very much like the rebels in the book of Numbers. And, tragically, this is a divine verdict that Ahithophel essentially executes upon himself. When God miraculously frustrates his lethal counsel, Ahithophel goes home, sets his affairs in order, and hangs himself. He descends directly into the abyss.
Section 5. Curses, Grief, and Kingship. The Broken Earthly King. Yet as we descend further into this historical narrative, we see a king who is deeply, profoundly broken by the consequences of his own past actions. Remember, David is not a pristine hero in this story. He is a heavily chastened king.
It's wild to see how David reacts to the chaos swirling around him. On the road into exile, this man named Shimei throws rocks and vicious curses at David. David's generals immediately want to take Shimei's head off, but David astonishingly just accepts this public cursing. He basically says, let him curse. Maybe the Lord told him to. He accepts it as possible divine discipline, but later, when he receives the news of the death of his rebellious son Absalom, David utterly collapses. He cries, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you." These agonizing words reveal the ultimate tragedy of a human king. Sure, David survived the coup. His throne is technically secure again, but he has entirely lost his covenantal heart. He's just a displaced, broken father, weeping over the very son who literally tried to assassinate him. Section 6. The Sovereign Divine King, Ascent to the Eternal Throne. So, how on earth do we resolve the immense tension of a completely collapsed earthly kingdom? Where is the hope when the human king is this broken? Well, we need to zoom way out, from the dirt roads of exile up to the heavenly courtroom. Because while Absalom played at being a king in Hebron, putting on this whole theatrical display of royal power, Yahweh was the true judge, orchestrating the verdict from eternity. David filed an appeal in this cosmic court when he prayed for Ahithophel's counsel to be frustrated, and God answered that prayer. He established a boundary, protected the remnant, and delivered the final verdict against the betrayers. The earthly events were ultimately just a reflection of a heavenly ruling.
And this brings us right to the pastoral climax of Psalm 55. Throw your burden upon the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never allow the godly to be upended. Amidst all that anthropogenic decreation, when the city falls to deceit and your closest confidant becomes your greatest threat, the ultimate takeaway for the righteous sufferer is to cast their chaotic burdens onto the only one who actually sustains cosmic order.
This leaves us with a pretty profound question regarding our own spiritual geography. When the ordered walls of our own lives collapse in betrayal, when the floor of trust completely gives way, will we trust the eternal King to uphold the pieces? We might have to cross our own Kidron Valley from time to time, but we never walk outside the jurisdiction of the sovereign divine King. Think on that as you go about your day.